Hey everyone, welcome to Building with the Notion API as part of Uplevel Your Notion. So glad you're here today. My name is Aman Gupta, and I am a partner engineer here at Notion on our platform team. Let's start by looking at today's agenda for our session. We'll start with some quick Notion fundamentals for how Notion works and how our API interacts with Notion's core services, and then we'll build an integration together. Some quick housekeeping before we get started. Throughout this presentation, there'll be links that I'll be using, and we'll be putting them in the chat functionality during this workshop and pinning them to the chat so that you can use the same links and follow along. Let's start with a quick how does Notion work? And to do this, we're going to use a travel planner. This travel planner is an example of a Notion page. Notion is composed of pages, databases, and blocks. This page is made up of some text content here and some callouts and some links to other pages. All of this is part of this page's content and is a block. Below this, I've planned out a trip to Barcelona using a table. In Notion, these tables are databases, and databases have properties, which are the columns such as activity, date, location, URL, notes, and files, and entries. Each entry in a Notion database is a page. We can open this as a page, and we'll see that this Notion page has its own properties that it's inherited from its database parent. Some content here, such as booking a taxi to SFO, my airport, and checking into my hotel. All of this content is a block. And lastly, there's an untitled inline table here. This table has its own properties. This table has entries that are also pages, and the cycle continues from there. Notion recently released our public beta API, and this public beta API allows you to interact with Notion's core features. You can use this API to create a page inside or outside of a database in Notion. You can update page properties for pages that are in a database. You can read properties and text content from pages. You can write content in the form of blocks to a page. You can search for content in pages or databases across your Notion workspace. And lastly, you can retrieve a list of users in a Notion workspace. So Notion's API lets you interact with these core fundamental surfaces in Notion. For today's example, we're going to use a service called Glitch, where I have created a blueprint that you can go ahead and remix. A link to this blueprint is not going to be in the chat, and we pinned at the top. To remix this blueprint, go ahead and click on the top left where you see Blueprint and Remix Project. While this project remixes, some quick notes about what we're using today. We're using Glitch, and Glitch is an online code editor that lets you run your code on the internet. This makes it really easy for us to demo today, so you don't have to set up your environment. You can use this pre-written code. Let's go ahead and explore this Glitch project really quickly. We'll start with the README. This README introduces what we're doing in today's workshop. So in today's workshop, we're going to use the APIs to work with a Notion database. And we're going to use some JSON from Spotify to add new songs to a database. We're going to then query the database for the song's popularity and add some tags to songs with certain rankings. And lastly, we'll update the pages with these new tags. We've already completed step 1, remixing this example project. There's also a .env file over here. The .env file is where we can store important variables for our project. That includes our Notion key, our Notion access token, and the database ID for the database you want to use. Let's go ahead and go back to the README. So to create a Notion database that'll work with this example, I'm going to duplicate a template that I've already created. I have this template open here, and I've added this template to my Notion workspace. You can go ahead and click on this template and duplicate to your own workspace. Next, we'll want to head over to create a Notion integration and receive a Notion API key. We'll head over to notion.so/my-integrations. We'll create a new integration, and we'll name this Aman's live bot, live demo bot. And you can go ahead and name it whatever you'd like and add it to the workspace where you duplicated that database from earlier. We'll go ahead and submit. And we now have a page here where we have our internal integration token and some examples, some information about our integration and the integration type. What we want right now is the integration token. So let's go ahead and show our token, copy our token, and head back to our README. We'll go to our .env file, and we'll add this token under Notion key. We also need a Notion database ID. So let's head over to our duplicate database, and the database ID is going to be everything after the slash in the URL and before the question mark at the very top. So we'll go ahead, grab that, and add that to our .env file. And lastly, before we get started developing, we need to give our integration access to this new database. So we'll go back to our database here. We'll share, and we'll share this database with Aman's live demo bot that we just created and invite it. So this bot, this integration now has the ability to edit this database. Let's explore this database a little bit. The database is currently empty. It has no items in it. It has a property for name, which is of type title. This is the title of each page in the database. It has an artist field, which is a text type. It has an album property of text type, a preview URL where someone can view a preview of this song of type URL, popularity, which is a type number, and tags. Tags is of type select, and a tag, a select type in Notion, lets you set properties for a given page. So let's head back to our .env file. All of our songs are in songs.json. This is a JSON file, which includes data from Spotify for a playlist full of songs from Notion employees and songs that they enjoy. We'll be using this as our data source today, but you can imagine this to be any data source that includes structured data. That could be information about your IT ticketing system. It could be IT equipment. It could be tasks. Any data that you can structure can be your songs.json file. This is simply our example for today. But let's explore our index.js file as well. So we're using @Notion HQ/client. This is our official Notion JavaScript SDK. We're going to be using our client, our Notion JavaScript SDK, to make requests to the Notion API. We have songs, which is our songs.json file, and our .env is bringing in the variables from our .env file earlier. We have a main function in this file where we're going to be doing a few things. First, adding all the songs to our database, songs database. To do that, we have a helper method I've already written here called convert song to create page operations. And this helper method goes through songs.json and extracts all the information that is important to us for our page to create. And then we're going to create pages. We're then going to get all the existing pages in the database and filter them to get all the popular songs. Each song has a popularity rating that's been assigned to it from Spotify. And then we're going to set the popularity in our Notion database. And lastly, if everything goes right, we can celebrate. So let's get started by first clicking on Tools on the bottom left of your page right here and opening your terminal. We're going to go ahead and use a full page terminal. And we're going to keep this terminal right beside us as we develop our glitch project. The first thing to do is we want to create pages by ingesting data from pages to create. We can see here that pages to create contains the name of the song, the album name, the artist, the popularity, and a preview URL. Let's go ahead and use these. We first have a check to make sure our database is empty before we add songs to our database, so we aren't adding the same songs again and again. And then we have a to-do here. There's also a link here to our documentation where you can look at the reference documentation to create pages. All right, so let's go ahead and create these pages. So first, we're going to be using a promise. So we're going to do await promise.all, and a promise.all is going to batch all of our requests to the Notion API to create all the pages together. And with that, we're then going to go ahead and use our variable pages to create and extract all the information that we need. That'll be the name, the album name, the artist, the popularity, and the preview URL. And we're going to take all of this, and we're then going to create a new function where we're going to use the Notion JavaScript SDK and say notion.pages.create. So to create a Notion page, the API first needs to know who the parent for this page is, what database this page is going to live in. That's going to be parent database ID database ID. And then you need to set the properties for these pages. So we have properties. And these properties, the first one will be the name of the song. As you saw earlier, name is of type title. It's the title of the page. So we'll set this by doing title. And the type of the title will be type text. And the text will include content, which will be the name of the song. Awesome. Let's go here to that extra enter. That's the name of the song. Next, we have the artist. The artist is of type rich text. So as we saw earlier, artist in the Notion UI is of type text, but text is represented via rich text in the API. And rich text is an array of text objects. So type text, and the text that we want to add has the content artist. And the other text you want to add is the album. So we're going to add the album in the same way. Type rich text, which is an array of text objects. And we have type text and text with content, which is the album name. There are two other properties you want to talk about and add to our database. We have the preview of the song, and preview, if you remember before, has type URL. And type URL just requires you send in URL that you want to add. And popularity. And popularity is of type number and takes in the popularity from before. So really quickly to recap, When creating a page using the Notion API, you have to first declare the page's parent, the database it belongs in, properties, and define each property using the same name in the database. We can double check this in our database where we have name, artist, album, preview, and popularity. We're going to use the same names here: name, artist, album, preview, and popularity. Let's go ahead and make sure this is all uncommented. And if everything here looks right, we can give this a whirl by heading over to our terminal here and typing in node index.js and running that. And it looks like it worked. All of the songs from that songs.json file have been added to our database here with the name, artist, album, a preview URL, and the popularity of each song. We also have a tag here, and we'll see that tags currently don't have any options. So we could either create options such as, super hit song via the UI, or if we wanted, we can also dynamically create these tags using the API. So let's go ahead and find every song that has a popularity over 50 and label it as a rising hit. And if it's over 60, let's call it a hit. To do this, we'll go through the API. We'll use the API again. So we've already added all the songs. We now want to get existing pages in the database. And to do this, we're going to use a function called query database. Let's head down there. So again, here is the reference for how to run a database query. And what we're going to do to create a database is first create a variable to hold all the pages that the query returns to us. And we set a cursor to undefined to begin with. Notion's API is paginated, which means that for really large queries like querying a database, where there can be hundreds or thousands of pages returned, the API will return small pieces to you. And if it isn't a full response, there'll be a cursor at the end. You can then use this cursor to make additional API calls to retrieve the entire data set that you're looking for. To do this, we'll create a while loop, and we will extract the results and the next cursor from our API call, which will be an await for notion.databases.query. Go ahead and do that. So how does a query call work? First, we have to let Notion know which database we want to query using the database ID. Then we want to filter what is being returned to us. To do this, we use a filter, and we want to filter on the property of type popularity, with the name popularity. It is of type number, and I only want results returned to me that are greater than 50. So only songs that have a popularity greater than 50. We're also going to limit the page size to 10 for the number of responses per number of pages in each response. And we'll set a start cursor to be cursor. Cool. Next, we will add the results of this. We'll add the results from this response to our pages array from earlier. We'll check if there is a next cursor. If there isn't, we will break. And if there is, we'll set the cursor to the next cursor. Lastly, we're going to return from pages all of the pages that all the properties from the pages that we care about. So here, that's going to be the popularity, which is the page properties popularity. And then we're going to return the page ID for the page and the popularity. So to recap, to query a database, the filter, you use notion.databases.query. You then give it a database ID, a filter, define the property for that filter. Here we're going to use popularity, the type of that property, number, and then the filter you want to use, greater than 50. You define a page size and use a cursor for pagination. If this worked correctly, then when I log the popular songs, I should see the right list of songs. Let's go ahead and test this with the same command as before. And there we go. We seem to have gotten the page ID and the popularity property for all pages where the popularity was greater than 50. And it looks like there are 2 greater than 50 in between 60 and 3 greater than 60. So now I want to go ahead and convert this popularity number to a tag. So I have a helper method here that converts popularity to tags and takes in this array of popular songs. Convert popularity to tags. It's down here in my helper method section, where if a property is greater than 60, it's a hit. Otherwise, it's between 50 and 60, it's a rising hit. And we save these tags and return them. So next, we want to go ahead and update these pages. And we have this list of pages to update. So we're going to head back down to our last undefined method, update pages. To do this, there's a reference doc again for a patch request to a page. To update a page, you want to use a patch request as defined here. So here, we're going to go ahead and once again, like we did before, use a promise.all to collect all the requests you want to make. And then look at our pages to update and map them. And from here, we want the page ID and the tag. I'm going to go ahead and call notion.pages.update. So to update a page, Notion needs the page ID, which is the ID from before, and it needs to know which properties you're updating. So properties, and the name of this property is tags. We can check this in our database again. It is called tags, and it is of type select. And we'll pass in the tag from before. So if this works correctly, we should see the tags here auto update for select pages. Let's go ahead and try this. We'll clear this for now and node index.js again. Let's go ahead and give that a try again. It might have been too fast. Let's see if this will work. And there we go. It was too fast the first time. So songs that are between a popularity of 50 and 60 have been labeled a rising hit, and other songs have been labeled a hit. The API has created these dynamically based on the input that we gave it. And there we go. So we've now learned how to create pages in Notion databases. We've learned how to get existing pages in the database and then set the polarity or set properties for a Notion page via the API. So this is all interesting to you. How can you get started? So first, let's head over to developers.notion.com to start building your integration. The first step is to go to My Integrations and create an integration for yourself and use developers.notion.com to get started. We can take a look at that right here. This is our API reference guide, where you can get started in looking at our reference docs. We also have a Notion Devs Slack community under the Getting Help tab here, where you can join our Slack community and meet other developers, show off your integrations, and get help from the community. You can also chat with Notion support from here if you get stuck while building your integration. And lastly, there are other examples under example code that you can view on Glitch, or you can fork a repository from GitHub to start building on your own, including syncing Notion with GitHub issues or sending an email from Notion via a trigger. So to wrap up today, we learned about the public API, Notion, making requests and interacting with databases. And we love to see what you're going to build next. Thank you so much for your time today. And I hope this has been informative and helpful.